I don't think engagement has been his issue. I think Lonzo, very rarely do I watch him, and it looks like he's just going through the motions.
When he's saying engage, I think that in his second year in the league, he's starting to realize that there's a certain level of intensity that he hasn't been engaged to. It's not as if he's not engaged, but he's not engaged at the level that he needs to be engaged at. And sometime through competition, you see that these guys are operating at a higher level of intensity than I am. Now, from his body language and his normal, like, that's his normal MO. But it's not going to work for him in the NBA. Like, we were worried about him last year. Like, how intense will he be game in and game out? And I think that's what he's talking about when he says engaged. He's talking about the overall intensity for which he's going about doing his work.
But you don't want him to change his approach. Like, there are guys who are very successful who aren't nearly, like, Steph Curry's not an intense guy. He seems to have a laid-back approach. You just want him to...
I do want him to change his approach. I mean, go ahead, C.
Steph is intense. You and I sat behind Steph Curry, and we were there 30 minutes before the game. Now, I typically do a good job of getting the eye contact. The guys, Draymond said, "What's up?" DeMarcus Cousins said, "What's up?" to me, KD, because I'm with Nick. Yeah, he was like, he kind of mean mugged me, but Steph did not look into the crowd. He has an intense pregame routine. He's working on his muscles. He's working on his shooting motion. He's got these things he does, and Steph has a fun personality, but inside the game, he's intense for what he wants to do.
I would compare Steph's during the game demeanor almost to a long-striding football player that looks like they're not running hard when they actually are. Like, some things come so easy.
Randy Moss.
Randy Moss.
Yeah. Where people would say, oh, he's loafing, but if you were to time him, he's running out of 4.4. Like, that, where Steph, he's so fluid, and it comes so naturally to him. It might maybe looks like he's not trying as hard as he is. For Lonzo, I think Lonzo's biggest issue is right now he doesn't know what exactly his role is. I think his issue was, all right, so I'm injured, I'm off the bench, I'm now in the starting lineup, but LeBron's going to dominate the ball. I think he hasn't found his footing this year with the team, but the other much more tangible issue is this. If you're scared to go to the foul line and you don't have an intermediate game, then how effective of an offensive player
he's only a spot-up jump shooter. And that's a problem.
Right, like because he's a good athlete. He can get to the rim. But guys that can get to the rim have to be okay with getting fouled. This has been, the Lakers now have, their 2 point guards are two guys that would rather pass the ball than go to the free throw line. And that's a like, you can take that at times from a center, especially because they're going to get so many touches down in the post. But if you beat your man and you got a clear path to the basket and then you see a big coming over who's going to have to foul you to stop you, you got to be okay with that. And Lonzo on the year, what's he shot? 10 free throws? No, I'm sorry, 7 free throws on the season. Like that, and we talked about this last year, about his lack of wanting to get to the line, and that one is, I understand he's not a good free throw shooter. Got to work through that. Because getting the other team in the bonus, getting yourself in the bonus, I should say, getting the other team in foul trouble, scoring with all those things are valuable to him, but I also think he's finding with some stops and starts as far as the lineup goes, finding his way with this Lakers team. I guess he thinks a little added intensity will help them.
Look, there's only so many days we can keep saying, well, it's early. Give them time. Give Harden a chance to get back. Well, give this team a chance to get back into it. Are you concerned at all, Nick, about a 1-5 start for the Rockets?
This is, to me, of far greater concern at 1-5 than, for example, the team we talked about yesterday, the Lakers at 2-5. And not because of the one more win, but because of how the teams have lost those games. The Rockets are getting blown out. Like the Rockets, they have 4 home losses already this year. By the way, they only lost 7 times at home all of last season. And those home losses are all by more than 10 points. They only had 1 such loss all of last season. Lost by 19 to the Pelicans, 11 to Utah, 20 to the Clippers, 19 to Portland. Yesterday, they never led, and they were down by 28 at one point. Like, last season, they started 25-4. This year, they're 1-5. I understand Chris Paul was suspended, now Harden's injured, but this team is not being competitive in these games thus far. That's why the 1-5 is so concerning. It's not, they easily could be 3-3. No, they couldn't. They couldn't easily be 3-3.
It's hard to imagine them getting blown out as many times as they have without having Harden in the lineup. You still think that they are the big 3, that being Melo, that being Chris Paul. Harden out of the lineup. Chris Paul looks nothing like a superstar. Melo, like I take exception with Melo. Like, he's nowhere near any type of star player. You know he's not going to be good on the defensive end. They're just not as talented. He can talk about not playing as good basketball. Their roster's not as good. So now, this season, they can't sustain an injury like they could last year. Last year, they had injuries, but they were able to overcome them all except the last one to Chris Paul in the Western Conference Final. They're not as good, and there's a certain amount of reality to this, and they're going to be struggling for seeding even when Harden comes back because they got a very weak bench.
But this was the team that many people thought was the only team in the league that could really compete with Golden State. This was the one team that we're going to win now. We're going to go after Jimmy Butler. We're going to do everything we can because we have a shot this year to compete with Golden State. What happened?
Well, for Daryl Morey and for James Harden, there has to be a bit of deja vu. 4 years ago, the Rockets were coming off a Western Conference Finals loss to the Golden State Warriors. They had won 56 games that year. People thought they were going to be right back in it the next year, and they went 41-41 and crept to the 8th seed. Then the following year they got better. Then they added Chris Paul, and you saw what they had. But there does seem to be a bit of an inability for this team after a great season where you come close to ratchet up the intensity game one the following season. It feels like it's such a long trek to where you end up wanting to get to that they're not starting the season off with the requisite level of intensity and attention to detail. Last year, Harden missed 10 games. They were 6-4. Like, they managed in those 10 games James Harden missed. So we can't just say, oh, you don't have Harden, so that's going to happen. Like, this team, you were seeing the warning signs before Harden left the 4th game of the year with his hamstring injury.
Yep. And also, Jenna, we sit there and watch the Warriors play the Knicks. Besides them being in the NBA, there's nothing similar. They're in the Western Conference. There's nothing similar about where Golden State is. You talked about how much fun they seem to be having. Their little routines they're going. They enjoy seeing, and they don't even have Cousins back with them, another all-star. Houston's going the other way. So, no, this isn't the team. There is no team in the NBA. So, unless there's some blockbuster trade, it is Golden State and the rest of them.
And James Harden, prior to his injury, was the only guy on the team playing at the level or close level he played last year. P.J. Tucker's been worse this year. Clint Capella, who got that big contract extension this offseason, has not been the Defensive Player of the Year candidate that the Rockets thought he was going to be. You're right that Chris Paul has not looked like Chris Paul yet this season. Now, how much of that was the suspension and how much of that is him getting himself into full regular season shape, I don't know. And Melo's been awful. Like, that is undeniable. Melo's not in the top 130 for field goal percentage.
Yeah, you did.
I did my best.
Bravo to you.
I said I was going to try with Melo this year.
And you did. So when Harden comes back, if they got someone like Jimmy Butler, could he make a difference?
Well, the Jimmy Butler thing, we would have to redo all the math.
How about this? Are they one Jimmy Butler player away from putting it all back together?
If they add Jimmy Butler, they reassert themselves as one of the very, very best teams in the league. But you guys know where I stand on Golden State. I think Golden State right now, as presently constituted, is far and away the best team, and that's before they add DeMarcus Cousins. That's where I think they are. But it also looks like Minnesota is just flatly not going to trade Jimmy Butler. Like, Tom Thibodeau, I think, is going to make the owner fire him to trade Jimmy Butler because they're not going to get a better offer than 4 unprotected first-round picks. That's literally the most picks you're allowed to offer, and Houston offered it. So I don't think Jimmy Butler's coming.
What's the biggest issue that this Rockets team has? If you could fix one thing, what's their biggest issue? I
knew they would struggle losing Trevor Ariza. You just can't just say, he wasn't that good. But the intangible things that he provided, the length, the defense, the constant knockdown shooting that they could rotate. They had another 2 or 3 guys who could knock down 3-pointers. They don't have enough shot makers. If you're going to play that style and you're going to have the analytics and everything, they don't have enough shot makers on that squad.
We knew that with the loss of Ariza Mbamute, particularly early in the year, defensively, they probably weren't going to be the same team. No one could have anticipated to be a bottom 5 offense. Right now, they're a bottom 5 offense. What was the thing last year, see? With 20 games left, they had the best offense in the history of professional basketball on a per-possession basis. Right now, they have a worse offense than the Phoenix Suns. Like, come on. And so that can't just be you've missed some of your best players for a couple of games. It's systemic right now in Houston. And if I were my pal Daryl Morey, I'd be concerned. Can't be getting blown out 4 home games already this year.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.